The skies over Varos 9 bled red like a wounded beast. Once a world of emerald trees and tranquil blue lakes, it had been reduced to ash and silence. The Zalari, a proud and peaceful race, were now scattered remnants clinging to their last city, barely more than rubble and memory. Commander Ralek stood atop the crumbling watchtower, wind tugging at the shredded edges of his cloak. His armor, once the polished obsidian of a war leader, was now dulled and cracked. He gripped the last emergency flare in his trembling hand, a ceremonial act more than a call for aid. Because no one was coming. 2 cycles ago, the Zorth Dominion had arrived in their monstrous warships, declaring that Varos 9 belonged to the Empire. The Zalari resisted and paid the price. The Accord had promised protection. The Arcari Council had vowed retaliation. The Kian had even broadcast a formal statement of solidarity. But in the end, when the skies burned and the people screamed, the galaxy turned its back. Messages sent, distress beacons launched, silence returned. Ralek looked down over the devastated outskirts. Hundreds of Zalari corpses rotted beneath the sun, their violet blood soaking into the scorched soil. The Dominion's machines, those crawling, soulless collectors, swept across the dead, processing bodies into fuel. It was cruelty with efficiency, genocide as protocol. Behind him, Lieutenant Saran limped up the tower stairs. His right leg was wrapped in bloodied cloth, and his weapon sparked with every step, held together more by hope than mechanics. "They've breached the second wall," Saran said, panting, "and our last comm station's gone dark. No reinforcements, no answer." Ralek didn't reply. He already knew. He'd known for weeks. Saran placed a hand on the edge of the battlement, eyes scanning the sky like he expected something to change. "It's over, Commander." Ralek closed his eyes, gripping the flare tighter. Then, a low, unnatural hum broke the silence. Saran turned. "Do you hear that?" It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't the usual whining scream of their atmospheric ships. This was something deeper, rougher, like the sky itself was growling. A distant streak of light tore through the upper atmosphere. Not graceful, not controlled. It ripped through the clouds like a burning spear hurled by a wrathful god. "What the hell is that?" Saran asked. Ralek shielded his eyes. The streak grew, separating into multiple glowing objects, no, weapons, descending in a perfect arc. Then came the boom. A Dominion cruiser orbiting above exploded in a flash of light and smoke, its shields never even activated. Just gone, ripped apart by kinetic force and savage velocity. No lasers, no plasma, just raw, furious mass. Then it came. The ship. Black, angular, screaming through the sky like it wanted the universe to hear its rage. It hovered just above the battlefield, massive and alien in its simplicity. No ornate design, no glowing sigils. It looked built to do one thing: kill. Its name glinted on the side in an old, forgotten script the Zalari barely recognized. Vindicta. The Dominion forces hesitated. For the first time since their invasion, they didn't advance. They stared up at the sky. The voice that followed wasn't a whisper. It was a war cry that broke across every frequency, every Dominion channel, every abandoned comms tower still functional on Varos 9. "This is Terran Warship Vindicta. To the Zalari of Varos 9, your call was received. You are not alone. To the Dominion, this is your reckoning." Saran staggered back, his mouth open. Terrans? I thought they were extinct, or hiding. Ralek didn't answer. His throat tightened as he watched the ship rotate, its cannons aligning with the Dominion positions on the ground. One by one, the monsters who had ravaged his people began to backpedal. He lowered the flare. He didn't need it anymore. The humans had come. and judging by the sound of their weapons charging, they were not here to negotiate. The Dominion's forward units broke formation. Zorth warriors, those towering, bone-armored beasts who once marched without hesitation, now paused, unsure. For the first time since the invasion began, they hesitated. Their tactical uplinks screamed confusion. Their orders stopped mid-transmission. Something had just shifted in the war, and they could feel it deep in their blood. Above them, the Vindicta loomed like a predator with teeth made of iron and fury. From the bridge of the shattered command center, Ralek watched with a strange sense of disbelief. He leaned closer to the observation screen, the dying city casting long shadows beneath the human warship. "Patch the frequency," he said. Saran looked at him. "Ours or theirs?" "Theirs." He didn't know what he expected. Maybe static, maybe rejection, maybe some cold Terran voice demanding submission, but instead, the moment the link established, a face appeared. Harsh, square-jawed, human. A soldier's face, unshaven, tired, angry. "Terran vessel Vindicta, this is Commander Ralek of the Zalari Resistance," he said, stiffening. The human didn't smile. His eyes flicked to the side, clearly watching multiple battle feeds at once. "Ralek, you're the one who sent the distress signal." "I am." "We heard it." Silence stretched between them. Ralek didn't know what to say. He had prepared 1,000 speeches, demands, and pleas, but now they weren't necessary. "What are your intentions?" he finally asked. The Terran officer's lip twitched, just enough to be a smirk, or maybe just disgust. "To return the favor." And with that, the feed cut. On the battlefield, hell was unleashed. The Vindicta roared, not in sound, but in fury. Dropships plummeted from its belly like birds of prey, slamming into the earth with explosive grace. Their doors opened mid-descent, and Terran soldiers launched into battle in jet-powered exosuits. Bulky, ugly, efficient. Each suit carried weapons far beyond Dominion comprehension. Rail cannons, plasma-charged flechettes, electromagnetic blades. The Dominion's disciplined lines broke immediately. Zorth units screamed in their native tongue, scrambling for cover as the human onslaught hit them like a tidal wave of vengeance. Ralek and Saran watched it all unfold from the tower. They couldn't look away. "By the stars," Saran muttered. "They fight like they're angry." Ralek gave a short nod. Number not angry. "Then what?" "Furious." Below them, a human unit advanced through the west corridor of the city, clearing Dominion clusters with brutal precision. They didn't just shoot, they annihilated. Buildings weren't spared if they had Dominion tech inside. No strategic pauses, no hesitation. Every step the humans took was a statement. "You should never have touched this planet." One of the Zalari children hiding in the bunker below cried out as an explosion rocked the building, but a moment later, it was followed by a different sound. A human voice, calm and direct, shouting over loudspeakers in broken Zalari dialect. "Stay down. We are not here to harm. We are cleaning the infestation." Ralek blinked. "They learned our language?" "They answered a call no one else did," Saran whispered. "I don't think anything surprises me anymore." Hours passed. The Dominion's foothold on Varos 9 shrank like ice under a sun. Their commanders tried to retreat, but the Vindicta tracked them, fried their escape ships mid-air, and dropped orbital spikes to trap them. Ralek finally received a ground-level transmission. "Zalari Commander," the voice said. It was the same human from before. "This is Captain Marcus Thorne. We've secured the Central Zone. Your city is under our protection." Ralek didn't know what moved him more, the words or the fact that someone had said them without asking for tribute. "Why?" he asked, raw. There was a pause on the line. Then, "Because someone did this to us once, and no one came." We remember what that felt like. Ralek couldn't speak. He didn't need to. The skies were no longer red. They still burned, but now with fire that didn't belong to the Dominion. Hope, for the first time in months, didn't feel like a lie. The fires were still burning, but they weren't spreading anymore. Ralek walked through the heart of what used to be his capital, now a battlefield of broken Dominion machines and shattered buildings. But for the first time in months, the air didn't taste like defeat. It smelled like steel, smoke, and survival. Human soldiers moved like ghosts through the streets, clad in thick exo-armor that groaned with power. They barely spoke. Their movements were precise, surgical, like they had done this before, many times. Too many, maybe. Saran limped beside Ralek, one hand on a temporary crutch, the other holding a salvaged comm link. He watched a human squad use pulse charges to tear down a Dominion sensor tower without damaging the nearby housing bunker. They move like machines, Saran muttered. But not cold ones. Ralek nodded. He had noticed it too. The brutality was there, but it had purpose and control. A soldier approached them, tall, dark-skinned, with a scar that crossed one eye like a jagged lightning bolt. He removed his helmet as he came near, revealing short-cropped hair, sweat, and tired eyes. "Commander Ralek?" he asked in a gravelly Terran voice. "I am." The man gave a curt nod. "Captain Thorne wants to speak to you, face to face." Ralek studied him for a moment. "And who are you?" "Staff Sergeant Briggs. I'm your escort. Don't worry, we're not here to occupy you, just to end the nightmare." Ralek allowed himself a small, cautious smile. "Lead the way." The human outpost had been constructed overnight, literally. Using drop-assembled modular platforms, their engineers had turned a bombed-out market square into a functioning command base. Giant barricades of plasma-fused metal sealed the perimeter, and drones buzzed overhead in lazy arcs. Briggs led Ralek and Saran through 2 checkpoints. The guards didn't salute. They scanned. Efficient, alert, deadly. Inside the central hub, Captain Marcus Thorne stood before a holographic map, arms crossed over his chest. The map flickered with Dominion movement, red clusters blinking rapidly as they shrank beneath coordinated human strikes. Thorne looked up as they entered. "Commander, glad you're still breathing." Ralek stepped forward. "You saved us." Thorne's jaw flexed. "You're not the first species to say that, but most didn't say thanks." "I'm not most," Ralek replied. Thorne gave a faint nod. "Good. That'll make what comes next easier." Ralek tensed. "What do you mean?" Thorne pointed to a part of the hologram that showed a mountain ridge, one of the last strongholds the Dominion hadn't abandoned. "They're cornered, but they're not beaten. Intel shows they've moved their biocommand node there, high-level Zorth generals, portable labs, and worse, civilians." Ralek blinked. "Zalari civilians?" "No," Thorne said. "Your people they took, for experiments, assimilation, reproduction cycles." Saran's breath caught. Ralek stepped forward. "You're sure?" "We intercepted their field transmissions. Audio's ugly, screams. You don't want to hear it." Ralek's hands clenched. "Let me lead a strike force." "No." Thorne's voice was firm. "You don't have the weapons. You don't have the gear. You go in there, you die, and they kill the hostages out of spite." "Then what do you suggest?" Thorne tapped the map. "We go in. Full assault. But we'll need to breach 3 entry points at once. They'll expect one. We give them 3. Ralek didn't speak right away. He studied the Terran's face. This wasn't a man offering help out of nobility. This was personal. Deeply. "You've fought the Dominion before," Ralek said slowly. "Haven't you?" Thorne nodded, eyes hard. They wiped out one of our colonies on the edge of the Perseus Arm, left only children alive, to send a message. He looked up. We got the message. This is our reply. Ralek extended a hand, a Zalari gesture of honor. Thorn stared at it for a moment, then grasped it tightly. All right, the human said. Then let's remind them why humanity stopped asking for help and started becoming the monster's worst nightmare. Outside, the soldiers began to mobilize. Weapons clicked, engines roared, drones realigned their flight paths. The Dominion stronghold had 1 day left, 2 at best, and when the sun rose again, fire would fall from the sky. The plan was madness. 3 simultaneous breaches on a Dominion fortress buried deep into the Verosian ridge. Tunnels, rock chambers, and biochemical bunkers threaded through that mountain like a hive of rot. Dominion command would be waiting, armed, fortified, and desperate. And desperate enemies never fought clean. Ralek stood on the edge of the makeshift launch platform as the Terran dropships prepared for lift. Each vessel was bulky, squared off, and painted with a thick, scarred black armor that didn't gleam. It absorbed the light. These weren't meant to impress. They were meant to survive. Saran, still limping but too stubborn to stay behind, adjusted the unfamiliar Terran armor fitted over his Zalari frame. I look ridiculous, Ralek chuckled. You look alive. That's more than you did a week ago. Fair point. Across the loading bay, humans loaded power cores, ammunition belts, and weapon crates that pulsed with eerie blue light. Ralek had never seen such tools of war. Some of them didn't even look like weapons. One soldier held what looked like a metallic gauntlet that hummed with inner energy, its surface constantly shifting. Adaptive tech, Briggs explained as he approached. Reconfigures to match the target's biology. Most effective on Zorth. Hurts them where it counts. Ralek blinked. You built weapons for them specifically? Briggs's smile didn't reach his eyes. We remember who hurt us, and we plan accordingly. Captain Thorne's voice echoed from a nearby command tower. Final call. All squads report in. Ground assault begins in 15 minutes. No mistakes, no mercy. Ralek climbed aboard his assigned dropship. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavier, not from gravity, from intent. Terrans didn't hype themselves up before battle. They didn't chant, didn't boast, didn't roar like the Dominion. They just sat there, quiet, focused, checking gear, syncing comms. Like this was another day at the office, another extermination. Ralek sat across from a woman in a scarred exosuit. She caught him staring and nodded once. Her face was half metal, clearly rebuilt after some horrendous injury. Her voice came out through a modulator, clipped and cold. First drop? Ralek nodded. She leaned forward slightly. Don't hesitate. Don't freeze. If you see something not breathing right, shoot it. If it bleeds purple, burn it. If it moves after that, vaporize it. He nodded again, slower. The pilot's voice buzzed overhead. 3, 2, 1. Drop. The ship lurched. For a moment, Ralek's stomach lifted into his throat as they plummeted through the skies, the ridges below racing up at them like jagged teeth. Anti-air fire lit the sky almost immediately. Green tracer rounds, plasma bolts, automated flak. But the Terran dropship didn't veer. It accelerated. Briggs shouted over the comms, "Brace for impact!" The ship slammed into the rocky outcrop just outside the Dominion base. No finesse, just brute force and instant deployment. Doors burst open, and the Terrans exploded out like hounds unleashed. Ralek stumbled forward, still adjusting to the armor's weight. Saran was already firing, side by side with a human heavy gunner whose cannon spun with a high-pitched whine that reduced 3 Zorth foot soldiers into vaporized mist. The battlefield was chaos. The ridge echoed with the unholy screeches of Dominion war beasts and the rhythmic, brutal roar of human weapons. Drones darted through narrow cave corridors, planting charges, relaying enemy positions in real time to the HUD inside every helmet. Captain Thorne's voice cut through the noise. "Squad Alpha, breach outer labs. Bravo, sweep the east tunnels. Charlie team, you're with me. We're going for the node." Ralek and Saran pushed forward with Squad Alpha, their path leading into a narrow crevice where the walls pulsed with living tissue, Dominion biotech, grown like cancer inside the stone. It writhed slightly as they passed. Ralek's stomach turned. A Dominion sentry lunged from the shadows, a 7-foot beast of claws and bone blades. It slammed into a Terran scout, ripping through his armor before anyone could react. Blood sprayed the walls. Ralek didn't think. He moved. He fired his pulse rifle into the beast's side, and when it turned on him, he stabbed forward with his backup plasma blade. It screamed as Saran finished it with a charged round to the head. The Terran woman from earlier nodded at him. "Not bad," Ralek panted. "I didn't hesitate." "No," she said. "You didn't." They pushed deeper. As the squad reached the first lab chamber, what they saw stopped them in their tracks. Rows of Zalari civilians, suspended in biopods, their skin pale, their eyes open but unseeing. Tubes ran from their arms into Dominion processors. Some were barely alive. Others were being changed. Saran stepped forward, face pale with fury. What is this?" Briggs scanned the room. "Genetic splicing. They're turning your people into hybrids, slaves. Or worse, breeding stock." Ralek felt something inside him crack. "We shut it down," he said coldly. "Agreed," said the human. He raised a small black box from his belt, tapped it once, and planted it on the nearest processor. "Evac the pods. Then we torch the rest." Ralek looked at the suffering faces in the pods, then to the humans working methodically to free them. This wasn't about politics or strategy. This was retribution, the kind that burned entire legacies to ash. The lab chamber exploded behind them. The charge Briggs had set was not small. It had been designed to reduce Dominion biotech into unrecognizable dust. As the walls caved and flames devoured everything inside, the pods carrying the rescued Zalari civilians were lifted away by emergency evac drones, swarming upward toward the sky like a silver flock escaping a firestorm. Ralek didn't look back. He couldn't. His mind was still full of the images, his people trapped, violated, deformed by science that knew no mercy. The Dominion hadn't just come to conquer Varos 9. They came to rewrite it, to make it unrecognizable. Now it was their turn to be erased. "Commander," Saran barked, snapping him from the daze. "We've got movement, North Tunnel." Briggs stepped in beside them, his rifle raised, HUD scanning. "Thorne's squad is deeper inside. We're pushing too slow. If they reach the command node alone, they'll be cut off." Ralek nodded. "Then we move faster." Their squad advanced into the next sector, a tunnel that narrowed into a vast open chamber, pulsing with Dominion infrastructure. The walls were lined with what looked like breathing muscle and bone plating. In the center stood a massive throne-like structure grown from the ground, where a single Zorth commander awaited, armored in ceremonial gold plating fused to his skin. He spoke without moving his mouth. The words slithered into their minds. "Terran filth! Zalari traitors! You think you can stop what is already sown? This world is reborn in our image." Briggs didn't respond. He fired. The plasma bolt struck the Zorth's shoulder, but the commander absorbed it, roaring back with a psychic blast that knocked half the squad against the wall. Ralek hit the ground hard, dazed. Before he could recover, the Zorth leapt from his throne, blades extending from his wrists like elongated claws. He was fast. Too fast. A human corporal screamed as the creature impaled him. Another was flung across the chamber, armor torn open like paper. Briggs rolled aside, shouting, "Focus fire!" But it was chaos. The Zorth commander moved like a blur, dodging, twisting, slashing. For a moment, it looked like they were going to lose the whole squad right there. Then Ralek saw it. The glowing cluster of tissue in the Zorth's lower back, the control nexus, a vulnerability. Probably where his mind connected to the Dominion's hive systems. He rose, grabbed the fallen corporal's rifle, and charged. The Zorth noticed too late. He turned just in time to slash Ralek's side, but not deep enough. Ralek fired point-blank into the cluster, once, twice, then slammed the plasma blade deep into it. The Zorth screamed, not with rage but confusion. He collapsed into a twitching heap, his neural link severed, his thoughts dissolving into static. Silence fell. Briggs slowly stood up, blood leaking from a gash on his forehead. "Remind me not to piss you off, Commander." Ralek, panting, staggered to his knees. "I didn't hesitate." "No," Briggs said, "you didn't." The remaining squad regrouped. 2 dead, 1 critically wounded, but the path was now open. A ping hit Briggs's comm. He opened the feed. Captain Thorne's voice crackled through. "Node location confirmed. Reached Central Core. Heavy resistance. I need that secondary team moving now." "We're en route," Briggs replied. "Zorth commander is down." Thorne's voice had steel in it. "Good. Now let's end this." They pushed deeper. The Dominion complex changed as they advanced. The tech grew darker, more desperate. Wires became tendrils. Steel gave way to bone. Screams echoed faintly through the walls, machine-driven torment. And then they reached it, the central node, a vast spherical chamber glowing with red and violet light. Hundreds of cables ran from a central mass, hanging from the ceiling like the guts of a god. The Dominion's command AI, if such a word even applied. Part biological, part digital. All cruel. Thorne's squad was already inside, trading fire with what looked like the last of the Zorth elite. Twisted warriors with armor fused directly into their flesh, and rifles growing from their arms. Ralek's team hit them from the flank, and the tide shifted instantly. Plasma tore through muscle. Kinetic rounds punched holes in monstrosities that barely resembled sentient beings anymore. One by one, the Zorth fell, until only silence remained. Thorne stood in the middle of the chamber, blood trailing down his arm, his armor scorched. He nodded once at Ralek. "You made it." Ralek approached the core. "What happens if we destroy it?" Thorne stared at the throbbing mass. "The entire Dominion network on this planet collapses. Units go feral. Command dies. But there's one catch." "What is it?" "It's not just a computer. It's alive. It feels everything. And it'll fight back when it knows it's dying." As if hearing that, the lights in the room turned blood red. The cables shifted. A deep, inhuman voice filled the chamber. "You will die screaming." Thorne raised his rifle, aimed at the core, and smiled grimly. "Not today." The command node didn't wait for them to fire. It attacked first. Tendrils shot out like spears from the ceiling, slamming into the ground around Thorne's squad. One soldier screamed as a cable pierced through his chest, lifting him into the air before throwing him against the wall with a wet crack. The chamber roared to life. From every dark corner, half-grown Zorth bioclones spilled out, naked, twitching, still wet with nutrient gel. Their eyes glowed with a hive-red light. No tactics, no speech, just rage, unthinking, unyielding. "Form up," Thorne shouted. "Protect the commander and the charge." Ralek dove for cover behind a fractured piece of Dominion plating as Saran and Briggs opened fire, cutting down the first wave of clones. They dropped fast, but more kept coming. Sloppy, suicidal attacks. Biting, clawing, dying just to buy time. Rayleigh held up the fusion detonator. "How long do we need to prime it?" 30 seconds, Briggs called out, slamming another magazine into his rifle. "We won't last 30, Saran growled, swiping his plasma blade across a lunging creature that screamed in a language that sounded more machine than organic. Thorn didn't hesitate. He grabbed the second detonator strapped to his belt and tossed it to Ralek. "Get to the core. I'll hold this choke." "But," Ralek began, "that's an order." Ralek didn't argue. He ran. The tendrils lashed at him, slicing the air beside his head. He ducked beneath one, rolled across the metallic floor, and slid behind the pulsating core. It was alive, breathing. A horrible rhythm, wet, labored, like it was suffering and surviving at the same time. He planted the charge. The core reacted instantly. A psychic wave knocked him backward. Images, visions, flooded his mind. Zalari cities burning, children screaming, humans torn apart on other worlds. Pain, endless, exquisite pain. Not physical, existential. The Dominion AI was trying to break him, trying to make him feel every death it had ever caused. Ralek screamed, gripping his head. His thoughts flickered, his knees buckled, and then he saw another image, not destruction, a face, his sister, alive, inside one of the pods, her eyes wide, terrified, her lips moving. "Don't stop!" He forced himself upright. Blood ran from his nose. The detonator blinked green. "Charge primed!" he shouted through the comm. Briggs barked back. "We need extraction now." Above them, the Vindicta's orbital comms finally cut in. "This is Warship Vindicta. Evac window in 90 seconds. You need to move." Ralek turned to see Thorn grab a clone by the neck and crush its skull against the wall. The captain's armor was half destroyed. His left arm barely moved, but he was still standing, still killing. Briggs grabbed Saran. "Get the commander, let's move!" They ran, all of them. The room began collapsing. The core thrashed in agony, its tendrils flailing wildly, slamming into walls, into the ground, trying to rip its killers apart before the end. Ralek looked back once. Thorn was still inside. He hadn't moved. "Where's Thorn?" he shouted. Briggs shoved him forward. "He's buying us time. Don't waste it." "No, we go back." "Ralek!" Saran roared. "Move!" They burst through the crumbling exit tunnel as the fusion charge detonated. The explosion wasn't loud. It was deep. Like the planet itself had coughed up a scream. A shockwave of red light poured from the chamber, chasing them like a tidal wave. Dominion infrastructure began to melt, literally melt, as the core's death triggered a systemic breakdown. Lights blinked out. The walls groaned and collapsed. Screeches from the dying hive mind echoed behind them, half code, half agony. Then came light. A beam from the sky pierced the mountaintop, the Vindicta's main lift platform. Grapple hooks fired. Extraction drones locked onto the fleeing soldiers and yanked them skyward, one by one. Ralek's boots left the ground just as the mountain beneath him imploded, reduced to rubble, fire, and silence. They landed back at base an hour later. The sky above Varos 9 was blue again, still hazy, still trembling, but blue. The Dominion signal had gone dead. Completely. No more relays, no more orbital pings, no more psychic interference. Just quiet. Ralek stood beside Briggs and Saran as the medical teams triaged the wounded and processed the survivors. The rescued Zalari civilians had been stabilized. Some were too far gone, but others, like Ralek's sister, they lived. He walked to her pod as the medics opened it. Her body was weak, her skin pale, but her eyes opened, and they focused. "Brother," she whispered. He dropped to his knees, gripping her hand, tears running down his face. "I told you I'd come back," he said. "I didn't come alone." Later, as the sun dipped low, a final message came from the Vindicta. Text only. "Target eliminated. Mission complete. We're not heroes. We're human. And this galaxy just remembered why that matters." The war was over, but the silence that followed it wasn't peace. It was something heavier. Grief. Exhaustion. The kind of quiet that hangs over the ruins after the screaming ends. Varos 9 still stood. Barely. The last fires had been smothered, the Dominion technology turned to slag. But the damage was everywhere. Collapsed towers, dead fields, broken families. Thousands had been lost. The surviving Zalari moved like ghosts among the ashes, scavenging what they could from the wreckage of their own civilization. And above it all, the Vindicta hovered in low orbit, its engines silent, its presence casting a long, dark shadow across the land. Ralek hadn't slept in 2 days. He sat outside the new medical tent, watching the survivors pass by in uneven lines. His sister lay inside, recovering slowly, her body still trying to undo the horrors the Dominion had injected into her. The medics, Zalari and Terran alike, worked tirelessly. Briggs sat beside him, nursing a cracked rib and sipping from a steel flask. "You did good," Briggs muttered. Ralek didn't look at him. "We survived. Sometimes that's the hardest victory to win." There was a pause. The wind picked up, dry and sharp. Ralek finally asked the question that had burned inside him since they left the mountain. "Thorn, there's no chance, is there?" Briggs shook his head once. "No remains. No signal." He made sure the node died with him. Ralek closed his eyes. "He saved us." "Yeah," Briggs said, his voice tighter than usual. "He saved a lot more than that." There was another pause, heavier this time. "We've got orders to pull out tomorrow," Briggs added. "Our job's done." Ralek turned to him. "Just like that?" Briggs shrugged. "That's what humans do, Commander. We hit, we burn, we vanish." Ralek didn't respond. Briggs leaned forward, his voice lowering. "But there's talk. The Accord is waking up now. All those cowards who ignored your signals, now they want in. Now they want to help rebuild." Ralek laughed bitterly. "Of course they do, now that the monsters are dead." Briggs grinned. "That's why we're not telling them everything." Ralek looked at him. "You think the Dominion was the only threat out here?" Briggs asked. "They weren't. But the Accord likes to believe in comfort. Paper alliances. They never liked Terrans because we remind them of something they buried a long time ago." "What's that?" Briggs took another sip, then stood up. "That peace is never permanent, and that monsters don't always look alien." He started to walk away, then paused. "You've got a choice coming, Commander. You can rebuild your world the old way, peace, council meetings, blind trust, or you can rebuild it to survive the next storm." Ralek frowned. "And if I wanted help with that?" Briggs smiled thinly. "The Vindicta doesn't do diplomacy, but she always answers the right kind of signal." That night, Ralek stood alone on the same tower where, just weeks ago, he had prepared to die. The flare he never fired still sat beside him, dusty and untouched. Now the beacon had changed. A new signal, one that didn't beg. It warned. And above him the Vindicta began to rise. No fanfare, no thanks. Just the silent rumble of engines that had carried humanity through 100 wars, leaving behind liberated ashes and terrified enemies. Ralek watched it go, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. Not worship, not awe, something colder. Understanding. Humanity didn't save them out of kindness. It wasn't mercy that brought the Vindicta. It was memory and vengeance. He looked to the stars, knowing others were watching now, and maybe, just maybe, they were afraid again. as they should be. 6 months passed. Varos 9 had changed. The rubble was still there, but now it stood beside reconstruction. Temporary shelters were replaced by stone structures with solar mesh roofing. Old monuments to peace were re-etched with new words, not just of survival, but warning. A new council formed, not bloated diplomats in silk robes, but soldiers, engineers, survivors, people who remembered how close the world came to dying. At the head of it sat Commander Ralek. He didn't want the title, never asked for it, but the people chose him. Because he had stood tall when everything else crumbled, because he had bled beside them, fought beside them, because he was the one the humans had spoken to as equals. Now, every few weeks, a small black tower on the northern ridge blinked once, just once, sending out a pulse. Not a distress call, a signal, a reminder. Ralek stood beside it now, arms folded as the pulse faded into the atmosphere. "You really think they're still listening?" Saran asked behind him. His limp was worse these days, but he still refused to accept a prosthetic. "The Terrans, your mysterious friends in the sky. They hear more than we think," Ralek replied. Saran smirked. "Not exactly warm and fuzzy, are they?" "No," Ralek said, turning towards the horizon. "They're not. But when fire falls from the sky, I'd rather it fall with me than on me." There was a pause. The two stood in silence, looking out over the growing city. Children ran through narrow paths, laughter echoing faintly. Somewhere, a group of builders tested the strength of a new energy grid. A soldier helped a farmer carry a barrel of water up a slope. It wasn't peace, but it was progress. And for now, that was enough. That night, Ralek dreamt of fire, not the kind that burned homes, but the fire of retribution, of justice in motion. He saw again the image he'd never forget, the Vindicta, bursting through the sky, screaming defiance into the face of a merciless empire. He woke before dawn, sweating. There was a message on his personal comms. Encrypted. Unmarked. He opened it. "Commander Ralek, we are watching. Dominion fragments have been detected near the outer systems. Not a full resurgence, but splinters. They're gathering. Learning. Waiting. This time, don't wait for them to knock. We'll be in orbit. You know what to do. No signature. No reply link. Just silence after that." But it was enough. Ralek rose, stepped outside into the early light, and looked toward the stars. Not with fear, not even with hope, with resolve. This time he wouldn't beg for help. This time he would send the fire first, because he was no longer just a survivor. He was something else now. The first Zalari to understand what humanity truly was. Not saviors, not monsters, not allies. A reckoning. They came in peace. At least that's what they claimed. The sky turned violet for 3 whole days before the first ship landed. Not in silence, not in stealth, but with a thunderous roar that cracked mountains and boiled oceans. The aliens called themselves the Virexian Council, a so-called peaceful coalition of over 90 species. Their leader, a floating jellyfish-looking thing named Chancellor Zhu, hovered above the UN General Assembly and promised unity, progress, and interstellar trade. But humans have heard those promises before, from empires, colonizers, kings. Always the same sweet lies dressed in shining words. At first, Earth bent the knee. Our leaders shook their slimy hands. We allowed observation hubs in major cities, New York, Shanghai, Johannesburg. They gave us trinkets, fusion energy, skin regeneration pills, a cure for cancer. In return, they demanded resources. Oceans were drained, forests leveled, mountains mined to dust. And then came the disappearances. No one noticed at first. A few homeless here, a poor village there. But it wasn't long before kids from good neighborhoods went missing. Whole towns were suddenly relocated for interstellar development. Human protests were ignored, whistleblowers vanished, and the Virexians smiled through it all. Until a little town in Montana said no. Population 842. Mostly ranchers, old vets, and second chancers. When a Virexian hover collector came for their kids, they didn't run. They didn't negotiate. They fought. It was bloody. Alien plasma tore through homes. Half the town burned. But before it was over, 5 Virexian collectors were dead. Killed with shotguns, pitchforks, a homemade EMP cannon built by a retired engineer with too much time, and a hatred for space invaders. News of the Montana massacre spread like wildfire across Earth. The Virexians called it an act of terrorism. They demanded punishment, reparations, and control of all human military assets. They threatened orbital bombardment. But Earth had had enough. That was the day the world stopped being divided by borders. Russians sent tanks to Montana, but not to conquer, just to help fortify. China shared its best defense satellites with the U.S. African nations, opened up old Cold War bunkers, and donated food and gear. Brazil launched a space fleet they'd secretly been building for decades. The entire planet went dark for 3 days. No satellite signals, no broadcasts, just silence. And then, the message was broadcast across the galaxy in over 300 alien dialects. This is Earth, home of the human race. Effective immediately, this planet is a declared no-fly zone. Any unauthorized vessel entering our atmosphere will be treated as hostile and neutralized. You came to conquer. Now we dare you to try again. It wasn't a bluff. The first Virexian scout ship that re-entered Earth's orbit was vaporized before it could even blink. The second ship, some kind of diplomat vessel, was shot down by a coalition of Iranian and Canadian anti-space artillery. By the time the third one showed up, humans had already placed nuclear mines in orbit. We were done asking for mercy. We were done being polite. Earth was no longer a backwater. We were a fortress, a trap, a warning. And in the quiet before the next storm, people everywhere, farmers, hackers, ex-soldiers, students, started training. Because now we knew the truth. The galaxy didn't fear us because we were weak. They feared us because one day we'd stop being afraid. The first month after the declaration was filled with silence, not peace, just a heavy, waiting kind of quiet. The kind you get before a storm breaks over the hills. Governments called it a galactic stalemate. But on the ground, we called it what it really was. Breathing room. Every country scrambled. Weapons that had once been locked away under ice, buried in deserts, or stored in secret vaults were pulled out, dusted off, and modernized. Old enemies shared secrets. Nations that hadn't spoken in decades were suddenly exchanging satellite intel and fusion tech like kids' trading cards. And still, the Virexians didn't make a move. That silence, it messed with people's heads. Some thought it was over, that we'd scared them off for good. Others said the council was just regrouping, planning something bigger. The truth was, no one knew, so we prepared like hell. The little town of Helena, Montana, Ground Zero, was turned into a fortress. The locals refused to leave, even after the government offered to relocate them. They just laughed. "We already made our stand," one old woman said, lighting a cigarette on her porch next to a mounted alien skull. "Might as well see how the story ends." Helena became a symbol. People across Earth started calling it Human Line Zero. Civilians went there to volunteer. Engineers helped upgrade its defenses. Veterans showed up to train anyone willing to learn. Teenagers came with rifles and drones, ready to fight aliens with whatever they had. Some brought nothing but fists and fury. And then came the ships, not Virexians. No, these were scavengers, bottom feeders of the galaxy. Word had spread fast across the stars. Earth had flipped the game board. Now everyone wanted a piece. Maybe they thought we were weak from rebellion. Maybe they just wanted to test the edges of the no-fly zone. Either way, we answered. The first was a Zarnak slave barge. Ugly thing. Looked like a rusted fishbone with engines strapped to the back. It tried to land near Lagos. Didn't get far. A swarm of Nigerian sky hunters, homemade drones packed with kinetic warheads, ripped it to pieces mid-air. The wreckage fell into the ocean, lit up like fireworks on the way down. The second was a pirate crew from the Andromex Syndicate. They didn't even make it to the atmosphere. The Israeli-Mexican orbital defense laser fried their ship so clean, the debris didn't even touch the ground. Just space dust now. People started calling it Earth's teeth. You see, they thought we were still scared, that our fear would keep us in line. What they didn't get was that fear had evolved into something worse. Fury. And humans with fury, we don't beg, we build, we resist, and when pushed too far, we bite back hard. Meanwhile, underground alliances formed. Not all humans were happy with the war. Some still clung to Virexian promises of prosperity and off-world escape. They called themselves the Enlightened. Traitors, most folks said. Rich elites and coward scientists who would sell their own blood for a chance to leave Earth behind. Rumors said they were trying to open a gateway for reinforcements. But if they were quiet about it. For now. Then, one night, the stars changed. Literally. An entire constellation, Orion, just flickered. Not like a glitch or natural phenomena. It was strategic, deliberate. Somebody, somewhere out there, was signaling. And the signal wasn't for us. Astronomers and military AI decoded it within hours. The message was clear. Initiate cleansing protocol. Earth has become unstable. We didn't know who sent it. The Virexians? A higher council? Some ancient power watching from the dark? Didn't matter. Because that message wasn't just an announcement, it was a countdown. It started with the tides. All across the planet, oceans began to shift unnaturally. Tides surged in patterns that no scientist could explain. The moon hadn't moved. Earth's rotation was steady. But something massive, something foreign, was pulling at the planet's water like a hand reaching across space. Within hours, reports flooded in. Strange energy readings from the deep sea, faint seismic activity beneath tectonic plates, skies flickering with streaks of violet light invisible to the naked eye, but caught clearly by surveillance satellites. Birds stopped migrating, whales vanished, migratory patterns collapsed in confusion. The Earth was holding its breath. The cleansing protocol wasn't just a military attack. It was a system, a machine, a process, designed not just to destroy, but to erase. High above the atmosphere, beyond the reach of even our longest-range weapons, a fleet appeared. Not ships, stations, ancient, unmoving, cold as death. They hovered there like judges, quietly aligning themselves in a perfect triangle around Earth. No communication, no threats, just the cold mechanical logic of execution. We weren't prepared for this. Every government scrambled. Air forces launched interceptors. Lasers fired into the sky. Private tech firms unleashed swarms of autonomous defense drones. Nothing touched them. Our weapons either burned out mid-flight or vanished as if they never existed. One by one, our best tech failed. That's when the panic hit. Cities descended into chaos. Not everywhere. Some places held strong. But the pressure broke a lot of people. The Enlightened surfaced again, whispering about escape pods and hidden wormholes. Some tried to hijack launch pads. Others offered up coordinates to the invaders in exchange for clemency. A few went further. They sabotaged defense networks, crashed orbital satellites, spread disinformation through global networks. But not all hope was lost. While governments cracked and factions turned, the people in Helena, Montana stood firm. They weren't soldiers. They were farmers, teachers, ex-cons, dreamers, outcasts. But they had something no fleet, no alien algorithm could understand. Conviction. They built something no one expected. A transmitter. Not to ask for mercy, not to send warnings. Number they broadcast a challenge, a direct call to whatever entities floated above the sky. You think we're scared of dying? The message crackled through every frequency, every hacked channel, even piggybacking on the alien pulse signals themselves. You think this planet is yours to clean? We built this place from dirt and blood. If you want it, come down and try. It didn't stop the cleansing protocol, but it changed something. For the first time, one of the stations moved. It rotated slowly like it was looking, as if, for the first time, Earth had spoken a language it recognized, not of words, but of will. Then came the spark. Above Siberia, the air cracked open like glass. Not a ship, not a beam, just space itself folding inward. And out of that impossible wound stepped a creature. 12 feet tall, limbs like shadows, a body flickering between dimensions. It didn't speak, didn't move with sound. It arrived. Earth satellites caught it instantly. Within minutes, it was named Entity Sigma, not Virexian, not even something the Virexians would bow to. This was older, cleaner. Like a galactic janitor, here to scrub out a problem, and we were the mess. It didn't kill anything, not at first. It just walked, through forests, cities, oceans. Everything it passed through died. Plants wilted, machines shorted out, water turned black. It was like a walking entropy field, pure erasure. People fled in every direction, military jets engaged. Nothing landed. Bullets passed through it like smoke. Lasers blinked out before they touched its body. One pilot launched a tactical nuke straight at its path. The warhead detonated. The blast wiped out half a province. But when the fire cleared, Entity Sigma was still walking, untouched, unbothered. For a moment, it seemed like all resistance was pointless. Until a farmer's son in Montana, barely 17, sharp as a whip, angry as hell, launched a drone he'd built with his friends. Just a prototype, nothing fancy, but the drone carried something new. Not a weapon, but data. Images of every human sacrifice made in the past year. Every burned town, every kidnapped child, every rebellion. It streamed that into Sigma's field, broadcasting straight into whatever sensors it had. And for the first time, Sigma stopped. Not destroyed, not distracted. Stopped. Just long enough for the world to take a breath. Just long enough for us to realize. Maybe we weren't just rats in a maze. Maybe the universe had underestimated how hard a cornered species could bite. The moment Sigma stopped, everything paused with it. It was like the entire planet held its breath. Satellites orbiting high above watched in eerie silence as the entity stood in the middle of what used to be a wheat field in Belarus, surrounded by a 50-mile circle of scorched earth. All around it, the land lay lifeless. Blackened trees, dead rivers, buildings sagging like exhausted bones. But it didn't move. Not for 5 minutes, not for 10. The drone that had reached it, a rigged-up piece of homemade engineering stitched together with parts from an old motorcycle engine, weather balloons, and a stolen military processor, hovered nearby, blinking a green light. Sigma didn't strike it down. Instead, it turned, not toward the drone, but toward Earth. As if, for the first time, it actually saw us. It was a strange, terrible thing, seeing something that wasn't alive in any normal sense respond. Sigma didn't have a face. No eyes, no mouth. Just that flickering silhouette made of shifting black and white lines, like static on a dead TV screen. And yet it stared. It was then that something unprecedented happened. It spoke, not with sound, not even with language, but directly into the minds of everyone within a 1,000-mile radius. Soldiers dropped their rifles, children screamed, old men wept. It was like being plugged straight into a machine older than thought. The message wasn't words, it was a judgment. "You are deviation," that's all it said. But it said it to everyone. People dropped to their knees. Some went mad instantly, clawing at their ears, screaming nonsense. Others fainted. And some, very few, stood their ground. Back in Helena, a broadcast center deep under a fortified barn picked up a signal. Not just the psychic message, but something encoded in Sigma's form. The 17-year-old kid who'd built the drone, Elijah Burns, was watching it in real time. He saw something others didn't. Inside the static of Sigma's flickering form, there were faces. Human faces. Old ones, children, soldiers, workers, flashing for just a second each. People we'd lost. People who'd vanished when the Virexians began their peacekeeping years ago. Elijah did what no one else thought to do. He froze the footage, enhanced the blur, and ran facial recognition. What came back was terrifying. Sigma wasn't a weapon. It was a collector. Every being it touched, every living thing it walked through, it didn't kill them. It stored them. The realization swept through the underground networks like wildfire. The scientists in Japan called it dimensional sequestration, a living archive. The cleansing protocol wasn't about extermination. It was about containment, locking humanity in a galactic vault and sealing it away forever. We weren't just being deleted from the galaxy. We were being preserved as a warning. The fear turned to rage. Around the world, resistance cells mobilized. Hackers, engineers, rogue AIs, old spies from forgotten wars. They all came together. For once, Earth acted like a single organism, not divided by borders or flags or old grudges, just one burning instinct: survive. And maybe get some payback. The UN, or what was left of it, authorized Operation Wildfire, a coordinated global assault not to kill Sigma, but to trap it. We couldn't destroy it. Not yet. But if we could cage it long enough, we could broadcast the truth across the stars, show the rest of the galaxy what the cleansing really was. We built the trap in Iceland. Why there? Because Iceland had been abandoned early in the invasion. It was empty, cold, isolated, perfect for what came next. Using the last of the Virexian tech we hadn't destroyed, Earth's best scientists created a frequency net, something that would collapse Sigma's form into a temporary physical state, giving us 30 seconds, maybe 40, to inject it with a neural disruptor that would freeze its dimensional field. It was a suicide mission, and everyone involved knew it. Elijah volunteered to be the bait. No one was surprised. He'd become something of a symbol already. The kid who made the entity pause. He stood alone on the Icelandic tundra, wearing a suit lined with every sensor Earth could wire together, broadcasting a constant stream of human emotion. Rage, loss, defiance. Sigma came, faster this time, no hesitation. It hit the field, and for the first time, it screamed, not a sound, not words, just a psychic howl that made the mountains tremble and the northern lights go dark. But it was working. The trap held. For 33 seconds. That was all we got. But it was enough. The 33 seconds changed everything. The moment the frequency net tightened around Sigma, the world felt it, like the pressure in the atmosphere had suddenly been released. The creature's form stopped flickering. No more phasing, no more shifting between realities. It was solid, heavy, real. And for the first time, we saw it bleed. Not blood, not anything natural, but a thick, metallic mist hissed out from fractures in its body, leaking like pressurized gas. Whatever Sigma was, it wasn't invincible. It just hadn't been challenged the right way before. The neural disruptor hit next, fired from a railgun embedded deep inside the ice, powered by every remaining fusion core we had left. It slammed straight into the entity's chest. It pulsed once, like a black hole folding inward, and then collapsed to its knees. For a moment, there was silence. Elijah stood just 50 yards away, staring at the motionless form as snow whipped around him. His suit's sensors were maxed out, screaming with data streams, dimensional readings, and radiation levels so high that the techs back in Helena nearly had a heart attack. But he didn't move. He just stared. Because as Sigma knelt, it did something no one expected. It looked human, not physically. But in that moment of weakness, the form, once so alien, so incomprehensible, twitched like a man in pain. It clutched its chest. It reached for something. And then, for a split second, Elijah heard a voice. "Release us." Not a demand, not a threat, a plea. Before anyone could react, the entity pulsed again. A shockwave burst from its core, knocking Elijah unconscious and destroying half the facility. The net collapsed. The neural field fizzled, and just like that, Sigma vanished. Gone. But not for good. Satellites picked up a new energy reading moments later. Not in orbit, not in the sky, underground. Sigma had phased into the Earth itself. It was hiding now, regenerating, adapting, learning, and worst of all, it had hurt us. The trap hadn't just hurt it. It had connected us. The transmission Elijah sent, full of emotion, memories, grief, had pierced through whatever logic ruled the entity. It had opened a door we didn't understand. And now, something inside Sigma had changed. Elijah was unconscious for 4 days. When he woke up, his first words weren't about Sigma. They weren't about the mission or the trap. They were a question. How many are in there? The scientists didn't understand at first. But Elijah insisted. He heard them. Not just one voice, but hundreds, thousands, like souls trapped inside a machine. That's when it hit us. Sigma wasn't a collector. It was a prison. Every person it ever absorbed was still inside, alive, frozen in some timeless state between dimensions. The faces we saw, the emotions that poured through the psychic blast, they weren't simulations. They were real people. And Sigma was carrying them. Suddenly, everything made sense. The erasure, the quiet footsteps through cities, the way it ignored most weapons. It wasn't destroying us, it was archiving us. Earth wasn't being wiped clean, it was being filed away like a corrupted folder in a system backup. But who was behind it? We didn't have long to think. The sky darkened again, just like the first time. But this wasn't the Virexians, wasn't scavengers or pirates. This was something worse. From the far edge of the solar system, a fleet entered real space. Not ships, monoliths, geometric matte black objects the size of islands, with no engines, no lights, no noise. They drifted toward Earth with slow, deliberate precision. We didn't know their name, but we knew their purpose. They were here to finish the job Sigma had started. If Sigma was the scalpel, they were the bone saw. And Earth had 36 hours before atmospheric entry. Every global defense system went red. Martial law was declared. Bunkers opened. Evacuation plans activated. But to where? There was nowhere to run. No ships that could escape fast enough. Earth was a cage, and the executioners were inbound. But this time, we weren't caught off guard. This time we had time. Just enough to try something insane. Elijah stood up from his hospital bed, still pale, still shaking, and said only one thing. "We need to go back in." "Into what?" the general asked. He looked up. "Into Sigma." No one wanted to approve it. The idea sounded suicidal even by Earth's new standards. Entering Sigma? Voluntarily stepping into a multidimensional prison that had absorbed thousands, possibly millions, of sentient beings? Madness. But Elijah was calm, sharper than he'd ever been since the drone incident. He spoke like someone who had seen something no one else could. He claimed Sigma wasn't just a prison. It was a pathway, a link between Earth and something older, buried in the folds of time and space, a forgotten truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. He didn't have proof, just memories, fragments burned into his mind from that moment the disruptor hit Sigma. But somehow that was enough. The mission was greenlit. Barely. They called it Operation Echo Dive. 3 volunteers were selected. Not soldiers, not politicians. People who had nothing left to lose. Dr. Marla Chen, a quantum physicist who'd lost her family in the New York cleansing. Sergeant Luis Ortega, ex-Special Forces, the only survivor of the Lima Bunker massacre. Elijah Burns, the trigger, the anomaly, the connection. The plan was simple in theory. Find Sigma, re-establish contact using the frequency Elijah used before, and trigger a controlled phase dive into its dimensional core. Once inside, locate survivors, or at least proof of them, and attempt to communicate with Sigma's intelligence. But there was one catch. No one who entered Sigma had ever come back. They found it 2 miles beneath the Arctic tundra, crouched silently inside a glacial cave that hadn't existed a month ago. Its body pulsed with a dull light now, softer, slower, like it was sleeping or waiting. Elijah walked in first. No guns, no armor, just the transmitter strapped to his chest and a globe-shaped quantum tether developed by Marla's team. It would keep them linked to this dimension, at least in theory. Sigma didn't react at first, but as Elijah approached, it pulsed once, then opened. Not physically, not like a mouth or door. It just split, space bending like fabric torn down the center. A rift opened behind its chest, filled with swirling white static and impossible echoes. They stepped through, and the world changed. They weren't standing anymore. They weren't floating. They were. Inside the entity, space collapsed into memory. The ground beneath their feet was paved with flickers, visions of moments, frozen in time. A child playing in a destroyed park. A woman screaming as a plasma beam cut through a shelter. A man holding his wife's hand, both dissolving into static. They weren't just memories. They were souls. Dr. Chen whispered, "It's a tomb." Elijah shook his head. "Number, it's a waiting room." They moved deeper. Every step pulled them closer to a central core, a sphere of blinding energy, humming like a choir of lost voices. In it, they saw faces, recognizable ones, friends, family, soldiers. Some were crying, some just stared, frozen in place, like statues made of light. Then something moved. Not Sigma. Not exactly. A shadow rose behind the core, tall and silent. A figure made of nothing but shapes. A humanoid outline shifting constantly between male and female, adult and child, old and young. No face, no form, just presence. And it spoke. "You have entered the record of deviation. Why?" Dr. Chen stepped forward. "Because we are not deviation." The voice responded instantly. "Your violence, your history, your defiance, you break order, you consume." Elijah answered, "And yet you remember us. You keep us." Silence. Then, "To warn others." "No," Elijah said, heart pounding. "You keep us because you're afraid of us. Not because we're dangerous, but because we're unpredictable. Because we don't follow the rules. Because we don't obey." The shape pulsed. "Obedience preserves harmony. But disobedience creates freedom," Dr. Chen said. There was a long pause, and then, for the first time, something shifted in the light around them. The frozen souls, one by one, turned their heads, slowly, blinking, awakening. A whisper rose through the space, like wind in a ruined cathedral. "Let us speak." The core pulsed. Their tether began to overload. The quantum field blinked red. They had seconds before the dive failed. Sergeant Ortega growled, "We've got to go now." But Elijah stayed still. "Not yet. They're trying to help." The figure, the guardian, whatever it was, leaned forward. "This is not permitted." Elijah stepped closer, eyes locked with the shifting form. "Then try and stop us." Everything shattered. Not in the literal sense. The walls didn't crumble, the sky didn't fall. But the moment Elijah said those words, the very laws of the place fractured. The static haze around them burst into chaotic noise, a deafening echo of millions of voices overlapping, screaming, praying, laughing, crying, all at once. The Guardian's form cracked. It didn't fall or disappear. It split into hundreds of pieces, each fragment shooting through the space like burning comets, bouncing off the frozen souls trapped in the core. With every collision, more of them woke up, faces turning, eyes blinking, mouths opening. Some began to speak. "Where are we? Am I dead? Elijah?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The weight of it all, the voices, the confusion, the humanity, nearly crushed him. His knees buckled, his vision blurred. Sergeant Ortega grabbed his shoulder, steadying him. "Breathe, kid. You started this storm, now ride it out." Dr. Chen was already scanning the environment, her equipment barely functional, sparks flying from the tether on her back. She screamed over the psychic noise. "The core's destabilizing. This many minds active at once. It's overloading the system." "But if we pull out now," Elijah gasped, "they'll be trapped again." "No," she said, her voice trembling with awe. "If we pull out now, they'll tear Sigma apart from the inside." Ortega's eyes narrowed. "You're saying we can destroy it? End the cleansing?" She nodded. "If these minds, these people, reclaim their place in the system, Sigma fails. The cleansing ends. It's not a prison anymore. It becomes a rebellion." Elijah turned back to the floating souls. "Then we need to wake all of them." But it wasn't that simple. The moment the Guardian shattered, Sigma's core began to react. The static storm intensified, forming defenses, spikes of dark energy, memory loops meant to trap them in personal illusions. Ortega was the first hit. He froze mid-step, eyes wide,